We believe it not because we're stupid, not because we're gullible, not because there's something wrong with us, not because we're materialistic. But we believe it because we sincerely are waiting to get to that moment when we can feel enough. But that's where the insanity begins. You look at, for example, something like a commercial for soap. Now, what does soap do? Soap cleans us, right? I mean, that's why we use soap. It cleans us. And so an honest commercial for soap would say, well, such and such brand of soap cleans you better than such and such brand of soap. Or Zest soap washes off so many millions of times more particles of bacteria than Dove soap does. Therefore, you should use it. But they don't say that. What does a commercial for soap look like? A beautiful woman. And she's lathering up while she sings in the shower in the morning. And then her equally beautiful husband comes into the bathroom and he's also singing. And he hands her a towel. And they walk into the kitchen together, hand in hand, and their beautiful child miraculously has gotten himself out of bed, and he's had his bath, and he's had his breakfast, and he's gotten himself ready for school. We're not selling cleanliness. We're selling happiness. And the message that each of us walks away from that commercial with is, well, if you don't feel like singing in the shower in the morning, or if your husband doesn't sing when he comes in the bathroom in the morning, or if you don't have a husband, or if you've got to drag your kid out of bed in the morning and force them to have their bath and force them to do their homework and force them to eat their cereal, the problem is you're using the wrong brand of soap. And it's laughable. But it's tragic. It's a tragic comedy. Because that's how we spend our lives. We change our brands of soap, and we change our brands of dishwashing liquid, and we change our brands of cars. Because, well, in the commercial for that model of car, the kids are singing in the back seat, and my kids strangle each other in the back seat. And so the problem must be I've got the wrong type of car. And we go through our lives one thing from happiness. And finally something happens. As for Simranji, it was the Vedanta lecture. For so many of us, something happens in our life. And we realize the journey. Aye, Najmaji. No, it's not disturbance at all. It's a wonderful honor. And so something happens in which we realize this outer journey isn't taking us closer. It's an inner journey. But then, of course, the problem becomes that we embark on the inner journey the same way we embarked on the outer journey. This course, that CD, this book, this certificate, this degree, this class, it's always going to be something outside of me that's going to show me, that's going to give me that happiness. There was a temple in Cambodia where for hundreds and hundreds of years they'd been worshiping this clay Buddha. And one day the monks in the temple are cleaning the Buddha, and they notice that something inside it is shining. And they think, oh, that's interesting, and they start cleaning it a little more, very, very carefully. And the shining from within just keeps growing more and more and more. And they slowly start removing the clay to see what's shining inside, what's glowing inside. And they realize it's gold. And so they start removing more and more of the clay until they realize that inside this clay Buddha is actually a golden Buddha. And the story goes that hundreds of years ago, when they had been worshiping the golden Buddha, and the invaders were coming, the monks in the temple at that time had been very afraid that the invaders would come and steal the gold. They were looting everything. They were melting down gold, breaking it all. And so the monks wanted to protect the Buddha. So they covered it with clay. And the good news was that the monks survived. The good news was that the Buddha survived. The bad news was that the monks didn't. And no one who knew that the Buddha was gold survived. So for hundreds of years, the descendants had been worshiping this clay Buddha, not knowing there was gold on the inside. And I love that story because it's such a beautiful, beautiful metaphor for our lives. Even when we realize it's an inner journey, we look outside for it. Oh, I have to become gold? Okay, well, where can I go to learn how to be gold on the inside? What course can I take? What certificate can I get? What CD do I need to buy to learn how to be gold on the inside? Without realizing, wait, I am gold on the inside. I've always been gold on the inside. The only thing that's happened is I've become covered with this clay. That clay of ignorance and illusion that then leads us to what we call our vasanas, our desires, or our ego, our emotions, our anger, our grudges, all of these things that keep us from being gold. And so suddenly that inner journey becomes one of not trying to find something we don't have or develop something we don't have. You know, it's an insult to God to think about self-development. Whatever religion we come from, there's no religion in the world that says God does a half-baked job. There's no religion in the world that says, yeah, God gets it right about 50-50. There's no religion in the world that says God needs us to come and finish off his work. What God does is always perfect, is always pure, is created by and of the infinite, the omnipotence, the omniscience. And so the idea that somehow God left us half-baked, and now we have to go through this course and that degree and this program and this certificate to finish off the job, is an insult to him. He's created us gold. It's just a matter then of how do I remove this clay? How do I remove that which is blocking my true golden nature from myself? And this is the other point that I want to talk about, which is that we've just finished this beautiful holiday of Navaratri. And I'll speak about it very quickly because I want to leave plenty of time for questions and answers afterwards. But there's something very important here, that the holy days of Navaratri that just concluded yesterday with Ram Navami, Navaratri, 9 nights, Well, what does night symbolize? Darkness. What darkness? Why do we do puja? Why do we observe fast? Well, the darkness is the darkness of illusion, of ignorance. It's the darkness of not knowing that we're gold on the inside. And the problem is that we all want to understand who we are. We need an identity. We need to be able to say, I am something. Fill in the blank. And so if we don't know, well, I am gold. I am whole and complete and divine. Then we're going to look to the world around us to give us that identity. I am a doctor. I am a lawyer. I am a scientist. I am an engineer. I am a professional. I am a billionaire. I am so-and-so's wife. I am so-and-so's mother. I am beautiful. I am this or that. And the problem is that none of that lasts. Whether it lasts a couple of years or decades, at some point, we retire from our jobs, we get fired, something happens, we're no longer a doctor. Well, then who am I am so-and-so's wife. Well, what happens if we get divorced or our husband passes away or if we didn't marry, but we were always told that that's what our identity is supposed to be? I am beautiful. Well, yeah, for a little while. Until you get in an accident where your face goes through the windshield, or until age just does its thing. I am a billionaire. Well, yeah, until the stock market crashes. It's what the stock market does. It goes up and down. It's the nature of the market. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. So if that's who I am, then I lose my identity. And so then we identify on an emotional level. I am depressed, or I am anxious, or I am a victim of this, or I am that. Well, what science now tells us is that all of that is just patterns of electrical and chemical activity in our brains. I can stick a metal probe in your brain and make you feel angry. I can stick a metal probe in your brain and make you cry, or make you feel sexually excited. It's not who you are. But that ignorance is what leads us to suffering. Because as long as I identify as this body, its history, its achievements, its relationships, then there's always going to be one thing between me and happiness. When I first met my Guru, Puja Swamiji, he held up a pen and he said to me, "You are not this pen." I was a PhD student, and a slightly arrogant one at that. And I thought, well, thanks. And I chuckled a little, and I thought, well, yeah, right, thanks, of course. And he was very serious. He didn't laugh. He looked straight at me, and he said, there will come a day when you laugh the same way when I tell you you are not this body. But that identification with it is what makes us feel that there's something between us and where we're supposed to be. That identification is what makes us think there's a journey to go on. Otherwise, right here, right now, in this breath, in this moment, I'm whole. Purnamida, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamudachate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. It means if you take wholeness, Purn, away from Purn, that which is whole and complete and divine, and you take anything away from it, well, that which remains is also whole and complete and divine. And that which you've pulled away is also whole and complete and divine. If we've been created by the infinite, of the perfect, then that's who we are. There's no such, infinity divided by 1,000 is what? Infinity. Infinity minus 10 is what? Infinity. So that same infinite, that same perfection to which we pray is us. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to become. The inner journey is one of simply melting the clay. And lastly, Navratri is a time of worshiping the divine feminine. Here we are, the women's organization. I was actually hoping to speak more on this, but the time has sort of slipped through my fingers. But what I want to just mention is that during Navratri, we actually pray to 3 different aspects of the divine. We pray to the divine first in her ferocious form, Durga, Kali. That form that destroys and wipes out the clay. But it's also the form which we need in order to be, as Malavika ji was talking, secure. There is a form of the divine feminine that is this ferocious, strong form. The divine feminine is by no means submissive, by no means an okay, sure, whatever you say. Her form to which we pray first during these 9 days, the first 3 days are dedicated to the divine feminine in the form of Durga. Why does she come first? Because first we have to be secure. First we have to annihilate that which is standing between us and that gold, whether it's inside, so we're annihilating the clay, or outside, that which is keeping us from being able to be secure. And then the second 3 days are Lakshmi, prosperity. But the real prosperity, the prosperity of abundance, the prosperity that says my cup runneth over, not the prosperity of how much is in my bank account. That prosperity that fills us with a sense of inner abundance. And then it's time for Goddess Saraswati, who's the goddess of wisdom, that real understanding, when that darkness of ignorance has been dispelled, and we see and experience and live in that gold. That's the wisdom of Saraswati. But Saraswati is also the goddess of music. And when we have that awareness and we have that real wisdom, that's when the music, the real music, plays in our life. Inside of us, not outside on our radio, but inside. And that's when we know there's no place to go, because the music is playing here. And I'll conclude here, I think we have about 20 minutes for questions and answers till, till 11:10, no? Oh, 12:10, sorry. Oh, sorry.
We have 20 minutes?
15 minutes, okay, whatever it is. We'll make good use of it for questions and answers.
That was absolutely goosebumpily good. Especially the three goddesses. But I have a question for you. Is it possible to have both inner abundance as well as outer abundance? In other words, can I have the peace of a Ramana Maharishi, the wealth of a Bill Gates, and look like Katrina Kaif?
Of course. Inner abundance has actually nothing to do with what we have on the outside. The two they're not mutually exclusive by any means, but they're not connected. One of the things that struck me so much when I came to India, I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up between Beverly Hills and Hollywood in a land where everybody has everything. And yet, there was a constant sense of shortage. You'd make a 50-item Christmas list or a birthday list, and you'd get 48 of the 50 items, and it was, well, what about the other two? It was always about what we didn't have. Here, when I first came to India, all anybody wanted to do was bring me home for a meal. Now, in Rishikesh, at the ashram and in the local places, people don't have money. People are very, very poor. In many cases, they don't even have shoes. And all anybody wanted to do was bring me home for a meal. And of course, I had been told very early on, don't eat anything from outside, don't eat anything from outside. So I tried to be very polite. I would say, nee, 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 nee. And then they'd say, at least come se kam cold drink peene aa jao. And I'd say, well, but I don't drink soda. And of course, nobody believes that, because if you're white and American, you must drink soda. And so you'd go home, and no matter how many times I said, no, 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 they would send out the oldest child into the market to spend whatever they earned that day to bring home a bottle of Coke or Pepsi. And they would sit there, the whole family, beaming, watching me drink it. This is Indian culture. And even if what that meant was there wasn't going to be money to buy sabji for dinner, they were full. India is a country. You spoke in the beginning so beautifully about going back to our heritage. India is a country that feeds first and eats second. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in homes around the world where we'll have spiritual programs and say there's a function in the morning, and we come back to the house in the afternoon, and the women of the house have been cooking all day, and the first thing they do is they feed the saints, and then the saints have eaten, and then they feed all of the other guests, and the other guests have eaten, and you know, it comes in courses. There's more and more people who keep coming, and they keep feeding everybody, and finally, it's now mid-afternoon. They haven't eaten anything since morning. Now, jo thoda sa bach rahi hai, they put it in a thali and they sit down. They're just about to eat, and the doorbell rings. And somebody comes, and what's the first thing they say? Oh, perfect timing. Maine abhi bhi aapki thali laga diya. I've just made the plate of food for you. Abundance is not what we have. It's how much we want to share. If I feel an urge to share, I'm wealthy. And it has no connection whatsoever to what's in my bank account. As I said, I've seen the poorest of the poor people dying to spend their day's wages on feeding me dinner. So of course we can have both. Of course we can have everything. It's back to the story of the woman with the key. As long as I'm not expecting that in that bank balance, or in that career, or in that beauty, I'm going to find that one thing, then no problem. Have it all. Dwarka was a city made of gold. It's where Krishna lived. Lanka was also a city made of gold. It was where Ravan lived. It wasn't the gold that drew the distinction between divine and demon. It was the nature of the being.
I have one more question and then we can pass it on to the audience, which is, do you have, this is something that came up in our meeting yesterday. What are your thoughts on how we should bring up our children? How can we transfer some of these values to our children, and especially to our daughters? Well,
Sons also.
sons also. The daughters came up yesterday, and so I thought I would focus a little bit on that, but whatever you have to share.
I think what's most important, I could do a whole talk on this, but I want to do it quickly. So, in a quick nutshell, what's most important is not what we say, it's how we live. And if our daughters have watched us growing up, complaining about the extra pounds, complaining about the shade or tone of our skin, complaining about how expensive the other person's sari was compared to ours, and how nice they looked, and where they got to vacation compared to where we got to vacation. Those are the values they're going to grow up with. You know, one of the things that I love to do is when I'm on the train, I read the newspaper. In the ashram, we don't get the English newspapers, but on the train, they always give out the Times of India or Hindustan Times. And I always read the matrimonial sections. And of course, it's always funny to see the expressions on people's faces watching a sannyasi read the matrimonials. But the reason I do it is actually very serious. I'm searching, and I'm now in my 18th year in India. And I'm searching for a matrimonial in which the girl is not described as fair-skinned. Tamil Nadu fair-skinned beauty. No, I mean, really, we laugh, but this is tragic. They are exotic and dark and beautiful. They're not fair. Unless somehow, through some family lineage, they happen to have family from Kashmir or whatever, God knows. And it's, you know, but in general, they're not. And so what happens? What message do our daughters take home? They know they're not fair-skinned. But what they know is that in order to sell them off, the package of who they are has to be lied about. And it's the greatest tragedy and the greatest disservice that we can ever do to them. What we need to make sure our daughters know, but it only comes when we experience it ourselves, is that it's not the color of your skin. I mean, where I grew up, we were applying lotion to be tan. I mean, literally, it was prom night. Everybody's putting on lotion, you know, or going to the tanning booths. It's not about the color of your skin. It's not about your waistline. It's not about your height. It's not about the expense of what you're wearing. And this sounds very trite, but it's very deep because that's what our daughters are growing up with. And if we want them to be secure and centered and strong, that can only come from within. They have to know from the time they are children that goddess lives within you. And the goddess is in all forms, and some of her forms are dark, and some of her forms are fair, and some of her forms are wonderfully, beautifully voluptuous, and some of her forms are more petite, and some of her forms are educated, and some of her forms are uneducated in their shrubbery. But where did Lord Ram go? Shrubbery's house. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, where did he actually end up? Shrubbery's house. So our daughters have to be taught, not just from our mouths when they're already late teenagers and in their 20s when we've already indoctrinated this in them, but from as young as possible. Who you are is perfect. Who you are is divine. That's the strength. It's not get this degree and you'll be strong, make that much money and you'll be strong, dress like this and you'll be strong, get that certificate and you'll be strong. It's who you are. But we can only give them that if we have it within our